The rain arrived early, the way unwanted guests do before the city had time to rehearse its reflections. By 9, the sidewalks of Southline were a long aquarium, neon sinking and rising in the puddles, as if someone were testing the electricity in the night. I was on my usual bench outside the 24-hour laundromat, waiting for the last dryer to spit out the shirts that made me look employed. The subway entrance breathed steam. Across the street, a noodle shop worked the kind of magic only broth can do. Behind me, the laundromat TVs had the sound off and the captions on. A panel of experts argued about someone's scandal like surgeons conducting gossip. I didn't see her at first. I saw the umbrella, black, cheap, trustable, shielding a face that didn't want to be seen by anyone who hadn't already memorized it. Then the angle changed, and the city did that thing it does when it recognizes a person you've spent years training yourself to forget. The sidewalk widened. The cars shifted to second position. My heart had the arrogance to rehearse a younger beat. "Maya," I said, and hated that it sounded like a prayer someone interrupted with a cough. She stopped. Her eyes were the same and not the same. Not softer, not harder. Just more aware that softness and hardness are disguises. The umbrella tilted, accepted the rain as a fee, and she stood in it the way people stand in applause they didn't ask for. "Daniel," she said. To the right of her name and mine, the city let a siren pass. A bus dragged a wave down the curb and offered us salt. She smiled in the way people do when they know the next 10 minutes will rewrite the last 10 years. "How long has it been?" she asked. "Too long to answer without lying," I said. 7? 8? 10, she said. "We always lose a few on the floor." We were good at this once. Quick lines, polite evasions. We'd lived together in the northern blocks when our buildings smelled like paint thinner and hope. We made a home out of shared insomnia and a window that faced a billboard for a brand of whiskey that has 2 settings: regret and ambition. Then we made a mistake neither of us was brave enough to name, and the mistake made a home of us. And by spring, she was gone with the plants and the yellow mug, but not the books. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Waiting for the light to change," she said, and then laughed. "I have a rehearsal downtown. The theater cut our pay and doubled the hours. We're calling it math." "You're still acting," I said, relief arriving as an apology. "I'm glad." "I'm still trying," she said. "You still writing?" "I'm still editing other people's good sentences," I said. "It pays better than admitting mine stopped arriving on time." The umbrella shivered off a sheet of water. She closed it because she was the kind of person who hated barriers, and the rain negotiated with her hair. She looked up the street. In the reflection on the laundromat window, I watched us stand beside each other like a crime scene diagram where the chalk refuses to learn humility. "Do you ever go back?" she asked. "To the old apartment?" "To that version of the night," she said. "The one that ends with a door and a sentence you can't take back." "All the time," I said. "I changed the line. I changed the doorknob. It doesn't help." "Do you want soup?" she asked. "I don't want to remember on an empty stomach." The noodle place kept its own weather. Steam, clatter, a radio playing a station that asked forgiveness from no one. We sat under a poster of a tiger that looked unprepared for modernity. She ordered for both of us without asking. She always had, and when the bowls arrived, the broth smelled like a longer childhood. "Did you get my letter?" she asked, as casually as a person asking whether the winter required gloves. "What letter?" She blinked. "I sent one last year, handwritten, to the magazine address because your home was a rumor." It wasn't a letter exactly, more like a confession, I said. "A map," she said. "But if you didn't get it—" "I didn't," I said. "What did it say?" "That I saw him," she said. The chopsticks paused in my hand because the body obeys story beats whether or not you believe in them. "Who?" "Jonah," she said. I looked for the wall I used to carry. It arrived. "Maya?" "In the station," she said. "Blue line. Summer. It was him, Daniel, on the platform across. Same coat, same way of standing like he'd been asked to audition for Reluctance." "It can't have been," I said, and the sentence felt like a code I thought I gave away. "He's dead." "That's the official story," she said, and I heard the theater in her voice. The careful weight on official that implies everything else. But official stories don't always care to listen. 10 years ago, on a night uglier than the one the city had on now, our friend Jonah had left a party 2 steps before everyone else decided to show how much they loved him by insisting he stay. It was a winter of rail closures and money experiments. He was the kind of person who kept the rest of us from becoming stories we disliked reading. Instead, he became the story, hopping the end gate, slipping down to the service track, a train that shouldn't have been there, headlines that have the nerve to be both kind and cruel. The coroner listed him as unclaimed for a week before the city learned how to spell our grief. "How sure are you?" I asked. 90, she said. "Which means I'm lying. I'm 100. I watched him switch platforms at West 42nd. He had a scar above his eyebrow. He got at the lake when you were 19. He touched it when the announcement said, delays. He always did. People are patterns." "And he didn't see you?" I asked. "He saw me," she said. "He looked through me like a window he built for himself." The waiter refilled water like mercy. The steam on the windows made a privacy we didn't deserve. I thought of the pictures from our old phones, us in thrift store coats, Jonah with his mythically bad haircuts, Maya holding a paper program from a show where she played a character who chose to be blind. I thought of the nights we planned futures the way prosecutors plan closing arguments, confident, rehearsed, certain the jury would applaud. "Why didn't you tell me then?" I asked. "I tried," she said. "I wrote the letter, and then I hid behind the excuse that if you got it, you'd be forced to forgive me for the way we ended, and I wasn't ready to be forgiven." "For what?" "For believing him," she said. "In the end, when he said he was going to disappear." She set the chopsticks down. Her hands shook, so little I might have evolved to ignore it. "He said goodbye at the party, Daniel, not in words, in the way he took off his coat, in the way he looked at the door. I knew. I saw him leave. I didn't stop him because I thought everything he did would turn to art later, and art needs its suffering like coffee needs its bitter. I turned it into a theater piece. I made him a kind of saint. He would have hated that. The letter was me saying I was wrong. The street had found another tempo. Rain insisted. A bus hissed. In the noodle shop, 2 teenagers argued in whispers about a secret so obvious it read as practice. I looked at Maya and at the part of the window where my face tried to remember how to be symmetrical. "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I've been going to West 42nd once a week," she said. "Thursday nights at 11. He always took the blue line home when he couldn't afford the cab he pretended to. If he's alive, he has habits. I thought you might come." "Tonight?" "Rehearsal ends at 10:30, she said. "The city owes us an hour." We paid as if money were the language of justice. Back on the sidewalk, the rain had become domestic, less performance and more proof. She opened the umbrella and tilted it so it covered us both, and if I had been a better man, I wouldn't have noticed the smell of her shampoo. "Do you ever feel watched?" she asked, smiling so it wouldn't sound like a cry. "When I write a sentence too true for the page," I said. "I mean in the city," she said, "like there's a version of you 6 paces back taking notes." "Isn't that what memory is?" I asked. She didn't answer. We crossed South Line under a light so green it could cure anyone. The laundromat machines turned like faithful planets. I picked up my shirts. She made a joke about men who iron when they're worried. We separated at the mouth of the subway with the kind of promise that doesn't have to be spoken to hurt when it isn't kept. At 10:40, West 42nd was the city's private play. The smell of electricity and spilled lives. The stairs were slick and the adverts indignant. A busker played an old song badly and no one rewarded him for honesty. I found Maya on the downtown platform sitting under the station clock like a person who knows time is a dare. "He'll come on the uptown side," she said. We waited. A train screamed into the southbound track and made arrogance out of friction. People disembarked like they'd been given a second chance at a test they hadn't studied for. A woman in a yellow coat cried beautiful tears into her phone. A man in a suit practiced a lie. The busker played the same wrong notes more confidently, proving the lesson of most arts. At 11:06, a train pulled into the uptown side. The windows were little televisions. We watched the show. Third car from the back, left side. A man with a coat that had long ago stopped proving he owned it. He stood the way Jonah stood, weight on the left foot, right foot pointed outward, like a plan that wouldn't admit itself. When the doors opened, he didn't exit. He looked toward us, not at us, toward and the scar above his eyebrow tugged at the light like a fish. He touched it. Then the doors closed, and the train pulled out, and the station rearranged itself into forgiveness. That was him, Maya said, and the words were so calm I nearly blamed the clock for not bowing. We took the stairs two at a time, followed the blue line mapped in our bones. On the mezzanine, a guard stopped us with a hand that had learned politeness the hard way. "Slow down," he said. "You only get to be young doing something stupid once." We stood at street level while the lights tried to sell us things we couldn't afford again. The rain had picked up the arrogance it had dropped earlier. I looked north. 3 blocks up, a figure crossed Easton Street against the light and didn't get punished. He moved like he owned a map no one else had seen. "Jonah!" I shouted. The word didn't travel. Or it did, and the city decided to keep it. The figure didn't turn. He disappeared into a crowd that had practiced leaving before they arrived. A woman with a dog made a face at me like I'd proposed marriage to the wrong person in front of her. We followed anyway, because that is what story demands. A chase, a fracture, a door. We lost him in the alley behind the old cinema, where the posters fade into the same heroic color after a month of rain. I leaned against the brick until the brick complained. Maya stood in the center of the alley and spun slowly, as if taking inventory of air. "He's hiding," she said. "Or we're projecting," I said. "Grief does that. It casts onto any wall it can rent." She turned to me with a patience I didn't deserve. "He's alive, Daniel." I wanted to say, "Or we need him to be." I wanted to say, "Or we both chose a version of love that required someone else to be the martyr." I wanted to say, "Or we're still the people who make everything personal because personal is easier to forgive than random." Instead, I said nothing because the alley gave me that instruction. At the mouth of the street, a man in a maintenance jacket watched us. He had the posture of someone paid to ignore and the eyes of someone who collects small truths to spend later. We walked past him. He didn't move. The radio on his hip hissed and then confessed it had nothing to say. "Don't be offended," Maya said when we reached the corner, "but I need to do something alone." "What?" "Follow him tonight," she said. "Take the next train uptown. See where he gets off tomorrow. If I'm there, he'll smell the past and bolt. He never looked at you the way he looked at me." "It wasn't a competition," I said, as if loving a person has ever been an exhibition game. She smiled. "Everything is, but this isn't about winning. It's about not losing the right thing again." I wanted to argue, and the city cut the scene. A horn, a siren, laughter hot as electricity. When I turned back, she'd already crossed, umbrella opening like a closing time. She waved with the hand that remembered me and vanished into the crowd with a grace that made me forgive crowds for existing. I took the next train. I rode to the end of the line and back, because bad plans often rhyme with good ones. At 1 in the morning, I got out at East 112th, where the streets looked like equations nobody graded. I walked. A maintenance crew hosed down a sidewalk with the seriousness of surgeons. A cat considered me and declined. I didn't see Jonah. I saw the city wearing Jonah's face and declined to argue. At home, the messages waited. One from my editor asking for clean copy like clean laundry. One from my landlord reminding me that heat is a luxury and rent a democracy. And one from a number I didn't recognize. An audio file, 10 seconds long, sending at 11:31 p.m. I pressed play. The sound was the blue line, the breath, the doors, the shy beginning of a guitar from the busker who believed repetition is prayer. Then a voice, a whisper near the phone, like someone speaking into the pocket of a coat. "Daniel, stop." My name like a warning, or a kindness dressed as one. I called the number back. It didn't exist. I texted anyway. "Who is this?" The message went into the disposable night where such questions are politely recycled. I slept 2 hours. The city took the others. At dawn, I wrote a column about a council meeting where a committee promised to rename a park after a person who disliked parks. I sent it to the editor with a note that said I was tired of facts, and he wrote back to say facts were tired of me. At noon, I went to the theater where Maya rehearsed. The lobby smelled like wood glue and ghosts. A woman at a folding table asked if I was a donor, and I said I was a problem. She laughed. I took a seat in the back while the director, a man who believed he could fix patriarchy with a scarf, told actors how to pretend to be poor. Maya saw me and didn't let it ruin her scene. She said her lines and then everyone broke for 5 minutes, and then 2 of those 5 walked into my corner. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I got a message," I said. "At 11:31, someone used my name and told me to stop." She waited like a city at a red light. "Show me." I played it. Her face sharpened in the way a face does when the body remembers a place before the brain can subtitle it. "That's him," she said. "He used to talk like that when he didn't want to wake the house." "Why call me? Why now?" "To tell you to stop," she said. "To do exactly what he asked and make you do the opposite. He always liked stories better than people. He probably thought of you and me as a genre." "Maybe we are," I said, and hated that the line wanted to be a headline. I offered to wait for her. She said no. I offered to follow anyway. She said I wouldn't be good at it. She was right. I went home and sat next to the window that looked at the billboard for whiskey, and the whiskey offered me 2 settings and I picked neither. Around 9, I took the blue line downtown and watched for my name in the faces of strangers. It didn't appear. That was somehow worse. Thursday night again, 11 o'clock. West 42nd. The busker had learned a 3rd chord. The station clock found its virtue. On the uptown platform, a man stood with a coat that pretended to be less than it was. He touched the scar. The train arrived. He did not board. He walked to the stairs and I followed 6 paces back, as if obeying a manual written by the version of me that deserved arrest. He didn't go to the street. He went to the mezzanine and through a door that read, "Authorized personnel only," and when the door clicked behind him, I stood in the hallway and listened to electricity pretend to be water. A janitor pushed a cart toward me like a moral. "Hey," he said. "I'm lost," I said. "You're found," he said, and gestured to the street. I obeyed. On the corner, 2 maintenance trucks idled with the courtesy of men not wanting to start their night yet. One of the drivers looked at me like I wasn't the first person to watch a door he had no business watching. "Blue Cap," he said. "What?" "You're looking for Blue Cap. He crossed under, took the service corridor. We see him sometimes. Doesn't bother anyone. Pays cash for a coffee out of the machine. Do you know him?" "We know everyone's route," he said. "Names belong to families." "Is he alive?" he said. "He passes the test." "Does he know you see him?" "He knows everything," the driver said. "Men who don't want to be known learn more than the rest of us." I waited on the corner like the city had hired me to be furniture. At 11:40, the door opened and Blue Cap Jonah stepped out, head down, shoulders low enough to avoid accidents. He crossed the street without looking and entered a building whose lobby advertised nothing. The buzzer panel had 3 names, none of which were his, and all of which sounded borrowed. I didn't go in. I stood with my hands in my pockets and thought about the last time I saw him laughing and what I could have said to change the vote. The next morning, the number called again. Noon. The city in daylight is a different religion. Voices echoed differently. I answered on the 2nd ring. "Daniel," the whisper said, "you don't get to fix this." "Where are you?" I asked. Silence, then breath. Then, "Everywhere you forgot to look when we were 20. You're alive." "For a while," he said. "Leave it your version of true." "Why?" "Because the night I died, no one gets to pay for it," he said. "That was the point. That was the only clean thing. If you come closer, you make it dirty." "Maya saw you," I said. He paused, and when he spoke my name, there was an old love in it, the kind that polishes and then hides. "Tell her I'm proud of her show," he said. "Tell her I'm sorry I made her into a script." "Why did you—" The line cut. The city answered with a truck braking 3 blocks away. I walked. To the theater. To Maya's rehearsal. To the corner where the building keeps its secrets. I told her what he said, left out the part where his voice almost saved a decade, and she listened like an actor on opening night. Still, greedy, dangerous. "We could stop," she said. "You want to?" "No," she said. "But if the ending is that he's alive and we are good enough to let him be..." Maybe that's the adult version. Maybe, I said. Or maybe that's the kind of lie people tell when they are tired of being brave. She laughed with generosity. We always did like sentences that flatter us. The show opened on a Tuesday to a crowd that believed in theater for the same reason some people believe in God. It feels more honest than the news. I sat in the back and watched Maya do the best version of disappearing a person can do on purpose. She took a bow to a human sound. After, in the alley, we stood with the others smoking without cigarettes, letting the night have one more thing. Across the street, a man in a cap watched us for exactly as long as it takes to make a decision. He stepped forward and then back. Maya saw him and didn't. I walked toward him and he lifted a hand, not to wave, but as if to set distance in the air between us, a ruler placed gently on a desk. Jonah, I said. He smiled the smallest disobedience. Write it down the way you need to, he said. But don't sell it. I'm not that cruel, I said. You're a writer, he said, as if those were synonyms. He looked past me at Maya. She looked up at the same time, a choreography no one rehearsed, and the city took a breath, like a theater that knows the balcony is about to applaud. A black car pulled into the alley with the humility of money. The man in the cap stepped back into its shadow. The driver's window lowered an inch, like a secret testing its volume, and a voice I didn't recognize said, "We're late." Jonah nodded. He touched the scar above his eyebrow, as if signing an old document. To me, he said, "Take care of each other." And to Maya, without moving, he said something that didn't require sound. Then he got in the car. It slid into night the way knives do into fruit. We stood there while the building exhaled extra. The director told someone to lock the back door. The stage manager counted props. Maya touched my sleeve. "That has to be enough," she said. "You believe that?" "I have to," she said, "or it's a story I won't survive." We walked to Southline under the same cheap umbrella, now heroic. The rain had quit. The streets shone like a cleaned conscience. At the laundromat, my bench was wet and righteous. She looked at me with the eyes of a person learning not to apologize for being impossible to forget. "If there's another world," and she said, "I want there to be a version where we didn't fail him." "We didn't," I said, "because someone had to pretend tonight that our arms reached that far. We loved him the way we knew how. He wanted something we don't know the name for yet." We stopped at the stair to the subway. Down there, the city had its arteries. Up here, the city had its eyes. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked. To the second night, superstition. "I will," I said. "And after?" "I'll bring flowers that look like forgiveness," I said, and earned a smile. We said goodnight. She descended. I stood and counted to 10 because old habits demand worship. When I turned, a maintenance truck idled a block down, lights off. Patient. The driver in the shadows lifted 2 fingers off the wheel, a casual salute that could mean anything. The truck slid away. Back at my apartment, the billboard for whiskey had switched to an ad for a phone that promises it won't forget. I set my keys in the cup that used to hold our mutual coins. On my table, an envelope waited, hand addressed in a script that practiced not being recognized. Inside, my own letter returned, with a note on a torn receipt. "Daniel, you don't get to write this one the way you want. Not because you're unkind, because the story doesn't belong to the living anymore. Tell Maya I said the line right this time. Tell her I stayed in the dark because the light wasn't built for me." Jay underneath, a line I knew, from a poem he loved when we were stupid and invincible. We leave by the same door we entered if we're lucky. Otherwise, we leave by the window we made. I sat with it until morning approved. Then I wrote exactly nothing. I went to the show. I brought flowers that looked like forgiveness and probably weren't. After, we stood in the alley waiting for the driver who never came. We watched the corner where the black car had performed its geometry. The city waited with us, bored, fond. "Do you think he'll call again?" she asked. "I think he said what he wanted to say," I said. "And I think he's right about me. If he gives me more, I'll try to sell it to myself as virtue." She laughed without cruelty. "We should eat," she said. We did. The soup was less miraculous, and maybe that was better. We told each other small truths, the kind you can afford on a Thursday. She asked if I still had the yellow mug. I said no. She said good, it was ugly. I said yes, but it made my hands warm. At the door to the train, We did something old people forget to recommend. We let the silence be larger than the scene. She squeezed my hand twice, our code for we are not done, and also for we are, then disappeared into the crowd. I stood on the platform until the next train came empty, because that felt like a kind of respect. Later in the window of my apartment, I watched the billboard pretend to be constellations and tried to believe in a version of us that didn't need an ending to keep going. Down on the street, a maintenance truck paused at the light and then rolled through on red, lawful as a prayer. I imagined a man in a blue cap tapping a scar and deciding to give us no more. The city will keep doing what it does, renaming parks, replacing billboards, washing alleys at 3 a.m. The blue line will breathe. A janitor will tell the truth to a stranger because someone has to. Somewhere a hallway buzzer will ring and a door will open that shouldn't, and two people will make a decision neither of them will get to rewrite. And if late one night a phone rings from a number no one admits exists and a voice like a rehearsal says my name, I won't answer. I'll listen to it go to message. I'll let the machine keep the ghost. I'll go sit on the laundromat bench and watch the city argue with the rain, and I'll count to 10, and then I'll go home. I don't know if that's the same thing as leaving by the right door. I only know this. Some stories belong to the light, where applause is an honest weather. Some insist on the dark, where the only audience is the part of you that refuses to be fooled. We got both. We lived long enough to hear our names said kindly by a ghost. We lived long enough to learn when not to follow. That's not closure, but the city and I have agreed it's close enough. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.